Here we are again. Welcome to Hired the Podcast. Travis Miller, and here with me today is Jen Dary. Jen is a leadership coach and founder of Plucky, a leadership coaching and consulting firm. She's worked with leaders at over 200 companies, including Google, Facebook, and the New York Times. She's been featured in the Wall Street Journal not too long ago. I read that your parents were rather proud and having difficulty finding copies. And she's also the host of her own podcast, the Plucky Podcast, which you can find after you listen to this episode, wherever you get your podcast. Jen, thanks for being here today.
Travis, thank you for having me. And that is actually a true story that nobody has paper papers anymore. So my neighbor gave me a copy of a Wall Street Journal, and a very kind person who follows me on social media sent me a copy as well. So rest assured, I'm sure it's framed somewhere in my parents' house at this point.
So I kind of want to start at the beginning. I want to talk about, with our current economic state, there are so many people looking for work, and there's a lot of people going out on their own. I read something like more businesses formed between 2020 and 2023 than there were in the previous 20 years combined.
Wow.
Lots of entrepreneurship. That statistic. What's the old saying? 87% of all statistics are made up on the spot.
Totally.
So I might be totally off with those numbers, but it's something like that. So I want to know, what was your journey like to decide to go out and hang your own shingle and do your own thing and form Plucky?
You know, I love the question, and I will back us up like 18 months before. No, that's not even true. 6 years before I started Plucky, because I think that is also a helpful crossroads moment for people listening to think about. I have a master's degree in French literature. Really marketable. So I did that because I studied English lit and French and writing in college, and then I won't even get into it, but I lived life. I had different jobs. It was exciting. And then I had a French boyfriend. And then I wanted a visa to go over there. And I was still super into French lit. So I went back to school and I got my master's. I spent the academic year in Paris. I came back to the US. French boyfriend didn't work out. And I got a job back here in New York. And it was at a French American school. And I liked it a lot. I was doing communications. But within about 6 months, I realized, oh, shoot. This is a small org. The path to promotion is to wait for someone to retire or die. You know, I mean, it was like a little stark. And I thought, Jen, you can either use your master's degree and use this French, or you could use your brain. And the reason I tell you that directly is that I think that our career paths are sometimes based on momentum. Understandably, some of us end up with a lot of debt from the kind of schooling we just went through. And it feels like you've got to squeeze what you can out of that. And I am not saying that's the wrong idea, but there may be a moment where you realize that the assumptions you've made based on sort of where you came from and what you're up to right now need to shift. And when I prioritize the idea of using my brain and sort of, you know, creativity and growth and whatever, just a different flex, different things opened up for me. That's when I moved into tech. I was a copywriter at first. This is in 2008, when economics are not great either. So I'm like, oh, why don't I try a new career? Oh, cool. Please don't get fired. Please don't get fired, like every single day, you know? So I worked at this tech agency for about 6 years, and it was amazing. And it completely rewrote my career. It started me off in a different direction. But so many of the skills that I had learned all along the way, not only in French literature, but also what it is like to be in a room where you don't totally understand everything around you, or to be meeting people across cultures, to be mentoring people or talking to other leaders at organizations. All of that followed me. So when I ended up in this career in tech, I was still leveraging a lot of what I studied. Now, all that said, I got to a point where I had my first son, and that gave me my first sort of significant time away from work. And initially that was, about 3 months. And then I ended up with postpartum depression. And so I needed to take another couple months. And I mean, perhaps you feel this in your story too, but when you step back from something and take a beat, sometimes it's not what you want to step back into. And it wasn't that I worked with mean people or bad people or anything. It's just that for a lot of reasons, including the identity shift of becoming a parent and the postpartum depression, it led me to wonder if that's where I should go back to. And I think that is kind of where your question is focusing on, which is that moment where you take a second and say, should I do something else? And should it look different on my resume? And should I put my own shingle out? Maybe. And that's kind of the backstory there, but kind of resonates for people who are starting to wonder those things.
It's so fascinating. You talk about momentum, and my story isn't wholly dissimilar. I have a degree in broadcast journalism and worked in Chicago media for a while. And I remember after I'd been a recruiter working here at Miller Resource Group for maybe 3 or 4 years, and I ran into one of my old teachers on the street, and is one of my favorite teachers. We got along great. I took a number of classes with him, and he said, "Oh, Trav, I haven't heard from you in a while. What are you up to?" I told him I'm working at a recruiting firm, and he kind of took a step back, and he's a little insulting. He goes, "You're really using that broadcast journalism degree, are we?"
Travis, I'm mad for you.
But he couldn't see it.
Yeah.
He couldn't see the ability to take the skills that I'd learned in broadcast journalism, the ability to truly dig into a person's story, to interview well, to show empathy and understanding in a conversation, to try and dig out the story.
Yeah.
Is what that entire degree is almost fully based off of. And that's what a great recruiter does. And plus now I get to talk into a microphone too sometimes.
I mean,
which
totally.
People follow careers based on momentum, and companies hire based on momentum. How can companies, I don't want to say ignore that, and I know there are certain positions out there that you have to have certain skill sets already ingrained in you.
Yeah.
But how can they find the people who are in the middle of that momentum shift and still have different skills to help them be successful in an area where you kind of got to squint to see it?
Well, first of all, I just want to say that it's too bad that person couldn't see outside the box that he was in. And probably that's because the world changed. I mean, I am 42 years old. When I was in high school, the idea of someone having, I mean, I'm sure there were people who worked on computers, but that was not something that people were talking about. And now if it's like, oh, I'm a front end developer or I'm a mobile, I mean, these are words that we did not know. So I think we can all assume that by the time our kids have careers, they will be things we didn't even understand were jobs back then. That's what happens in the world. The future comes, hopefully, and there are new jobs we never heard of. So how could we possibly train at 18 years old for something that is going to be invented 10 years later, right? This leads me to be super proponent of liberal arts educations, where what you are learning are not only skills, but like flexibility and critical thinking. So if I'm a large company and I would like to hire people that don't all have the same cookie cutter background, what I'm going to look for is not their code samples, although, again, to your point, there are some roles that you really have to cut the mustard, right? But I'm going to listen to their story and hear, when did they change their mind about something? When did they show flexibility? What was a big challenge and how did they get through it? What's their orientation towards people? Can they lead them? Can they listen to them? Do they have conflict with them? These are the kind of questions that it's really hard to put in a resume. I'm good at people. What does that mean? You know, a lot of people would say that. They're not all right. So I think that and I mean, whatever, this is like your bread and butter over here, but the notion of recruiting via stories, like asking people to tell me about a time when, that's certainly a type of question that is going to invite an irregular response and a non-traditional, hopefully. And you're going to get a better sense of the shape of the person as opposed to the linear resume for them. And again, this is going to like kind of walk an interesting line here in terms of DEI. You want to make sure that you are interviewing people in a very fair way. But nonetheless, these kinds of questions I think are fair in that you're giving everybody a chance to tell their story, and you want to be diversified in the kind of folks you resource together on a team for all the reasons you're saying.
It's one of the most difficult things for people searching for a position to do is tell about a time when. It's so difficult to do a good job of being a great storyteller. It's such a difficult skill that most people don't have. It's very easy to answer a question in corporate speak and gobbledygook. And we say in our office, there's the only question you can ever ask someone that you are positive isn't bullshit is tell me what you know about me. What do you know about me? What do you know about my company? Because that's the only thing that I can truly know that you went out and researched. Everything else could be made up. And so I think it's an interesting concept, and that people are bad at storytelling because it's so easy to speak in all kinds of corporate speak and answer questions abstractly. And during an interview, when somebody answers a question, how often do they really answer the question? And what I kind of observed here in our company, that the only question that you can be 100% sure isn't bullshit is the question, what do you know about me? What do you know about my company? Because that's the only thing I can know for a fact that you went out and did your homework on. So anyway, I guess my question is, if somebody's out there searching for their next role, what can they do to develop this storytelling skill so that they can present themselves in the best possible way for the position that they want?
I think everybody, is this too crazy? No. I think everybody has to learn how to tell a story. Everybody has to, at a certain point, you have to tell stories in your career. You have to tell, if you're at a client services firm, you have to be able to present work. You have to make a pitch for your own promotional path. If you're managing, you sure as heck have to learn how to tell stories about how to get people to collaborate together, work together, avoid toxicity. So it may be true that we have some seasons of our careers where we don't feel as comfortable with that, but I think, I can't remember how you just said it, but this feeling of being comfortable enough with yourself and confident enough in yourself to tell stories is very real. And it's worth investing in yourself in that way, whether that's a public speaking coach or even just doing some writing, blog posting, like all of those things count as ways that you're sharing your story. I sometimes work with people who are preparing to give a keynote or an address at a conference or things like that. And I always say that you're going to be less nervous if you're telling something true. So if it's a story about, like, and I also think it's a really strong way to start a talk is for you to say, I was sitting in my living room when the phone rang. Phones don't ring anymore. I was sitting in my living room when I got the text that there was a round of layoffs. And as a manager, I was stressed. And then you go in and you tell the story about what it's like to manage through disruption and layoffs and whatever. That is not as scary as it would be to stand up and, to your point 2 minutes ago, say, I have the statistics on layoffs and the stress of that. Like, right? That's stuff you got to remember and memorize. But when it comes to your experience and what you've just lived through, you don't forget that. I mean, that's just sort of how you move through the world. So to me, one of the biggest, I guess I'll say almost epidemics, although that sounds weird to say after pandemic, out there is low confidence. Low confidence is all over the place, and it shows up in a lot of ways. It doesn't only show up in the I'm quiet and I'm not going to participate and I'm going to sit in the corner and I'm not confident about myself. It also shows up in the exact opposite. Elon Musk, somebody who's out pontificating about how great they are all the time and how amazing they are and how they're the only solution for humanity to possibly save us all. I mean, hello, that's the same problem. It just manifests differently. So if I was going to kind of give any gentle guidance for anybody looking for a job, I would say, get right with yourself. Know who you are. Know what skills you bring to the table. Share that and look for jobs that are going to celebrate that. Other than that, you're setting yourself up for a bumpy ride.
Mm-hmm. Well, as an expert in leadership coaching, can you tell me about a time when you successfully coached a new leader? Because this is something that I really am excited to talk to you about, is emerging leaders and specifically new leaders who lead leaders, which I think is it's such a huge skills gap in the workforce, because companies do the right thing a lot of times, and they try to promote from within, as I think they should. And they find somebody who's great at performing task A, and they're so successful and they're doing it so well, and they've done it for so long that they say, well, you've done task A. Well, now this should be easy. Go lead a bunch of people who are also performing task A. And it's just a totally different skill set.
Yes.
So I want to hear about a time, because we love stories, about somebody you've helped and what they've done and what you've helped them do to successfully make that transition from doer to leader.
I will sort of pool and crowdsource a story by saying it like this. I teach a new manager training called So Now You're a Manager, specifically to address everything you're talking about, which is that you are great at engineering, therefore you must be ready to lead the engineers. But like you just said, different skill set, different ballgame. What I hear from all of my attendees in this class is a different version of I have lost control. It's really weird because you just got more power, but by that promotion and into management, you are not you don't have control over everything on your plate anymore. Previously, maybe you just took the tickets that were given to you, or you ran the meetings, or you contacted the clients, you pushed for the deadlines, like all that stuff as an individual contributor. As an IC, you have control over that stuff. You show up to work, maybe you work a little late because it needs to get done. That's all within your purview. Humans are a different ballgame. And so when you're promoted to be a new manager of 5 people, 7 people, their career paths, how they're doing, they just became new parents, they just lost a loved one, they're working remotely, they are not yet connected to the team. I mean, these challenges are really hard, even for very adept managers. And so the stories that I hear from new managers is like, how do I know I'm doing a good job? Is it if nobody quits? Like, what's the metric here, you know? And it's just really challenging to describe what success looks like for a manager. You can feel it. There's like a hum on a team when there's open communication and trust, and people feel like the manager is an advocate, that they have a respect for the manager. In some cases, people follow managers to new jobs, right? If you're really lucky. But new managers are kind of like toddlers in this way. They haven't figured out where the balance is or how to walk, or sometimes they run too fast and then they're kind of falls back on their butt. You know, it's like, it's a totally brand new skill that they haven't had yet. And it's so ironic, right, Travis? Because they got promoted, which means like, you're so good at stuff. And then they're a toddler again. And there's a heck of a lot of humility that needs to come with that for the moments that you aren't so good at stuff.
I love that toddler analogy, and it's so hysterical, and it's so probably so fresh in your eyes and my eyes as parents of recent toddlers. They've just barely making the transition. And as parents, I'm going to take this metaphor as far as I can because I really like it.
Do it.
As parents, when we have a toddler, how much crap do we buy to ensure their safety? I mean, baby gates, there's padded corners on everything. You read all the books. Don't put this in the crib because they could die imminently.
Totally.
Everything is, you are worried 100% of the time of imminent death.
Yes.
But executive leadership, the leaders of leaders don't do that. They don't set up the guardrails. They don't put the safety nets in place. They don't play the games with them to get them to walk 5 steps first.
Yeah.
So how do they do that? What can the leaders do to set up the new leaders for the best possible success that they can have?
It's occurring to me as you're describing all that I wonder if sometimes part of the problem is that we invest in a middle manager, or, you know, just sort of like a normal level manager to create efficiency. So it's like, oh gosh, this person has 12 reports. We got to spin another one up over here and split 6 and 6. And efficiency sometimes drives at that. When you're trying to be efficient, though, you may be less inclined to invest. It's like, no, this is supposed to get faster, cheaper, whatever. nonetheless, I do think that you're an idiot if you don't send your manager to training or if you don't provide them coaching. What do you think is going to happen? I mean, you're band-aiding it through, I don't know, maybe a year, but you're now going to end up with team member direct reports who are kind of all over the place. They are, not knowing how to respond to this new manager. In some cases, you're going to have very senior, I'm talking about more tech here, right? Like developers or whatnot. But think about, you have a staff engineer who's reporting to a new manager. This person's going to run circles around your new manager. That new manager cannot do the manager lifting for such a team. So there's just infinite numbers of things that are hiccups along the way, or I won't even call them problems. It's really learning. I mean, that's what you're talking about with the toddler stuff, right? Like, we're just padding things. We're not saying stay in the crib. We're saying come out, but we're going to help you out with it. So trainings, coaching, mentorship, and honestly, a real cheap one would be for senior leaders to model what the hell they want to be happening on the mid-tier or the sort of lowest level of management. If they could be strong models for that, then it kind of it pads the room, right? For lack of a better word, it creates some stability for the newer managers on staff.
And don't forget about the other incredibly cheap resource, those fancy one-to-one cards you have on your website.
And here we are. Exactly. Yes, thank you for saying that, Travis. I have these right here. So what Travis is talking about, all of our dear listeners, is I have these 3 packs of cards. The original OG here is the one-on-one starter pack. The reason that I made this is because there were so many good questions that were coming up in coaching, and it would create this great conversation. And I would say, oh my gosh, steal that question, bring it to your one-on-ones next week. And people were like kind of shy, like, I don't know if I could just show up to one-on-ones and ask my direct reports that question now, all of a sudden, out of nowhere. So I was like, they need an excuse. They need something to not lose cred somehow. So I made this deck of cards. Like I said, this one is the starter pack, which is for new managers, but I also have one for manager of managers. To your point, that's a totally different stratosphere of thinking. And then I have a mentor pack for people who are looking for mentorship. And all of these cards just have a question on it. And people have so much fun. Like, random strangers report back that their reports come to the one-on-ones. They're like, are we going to do a Plucky card? Like, that's what they say. Are we going to do a Plucky card? Because your boss is not an ass. Like, in those conversations, the boss might say something like, what's an example of invisible work in your job? Oh, then the report can be like, let me tell you about some invisible work, and you don't even have any idea. Now the manager's like, oh my God, we could totally hire someone to do that. Or thank you for doing that. Or, oh my gosh, deprioritize, never do it again. There are so many options that come out of just that one answer. And so really what I'm doing with these cards is suggesting that there is a tool. This is like $38, right? For $38, you could set your new manager up with at least some kind of tool or strategy for, this is what I could talk about in these meetings. Because if you don't have this kind of stuff to talk about and you're just syncing up on like, how's the deadline, nobody wants to go to those meetings, and then they cancel them, and then they have no trust with each other, and then everybody quits. And, I'm just like shortcutting the downfall of a company here. But a deck of cards could help.
I'm not going to ask you to give away the farm, but I'm curious. What's like your third favorite question in the starter pack?
Oh gosh.
Because they got to buy it if they want to get your favorite question.
I mean, I'll just the one that comes to mind because I was using it in a small coaching group last week is, I might biff this question, but it's basically something like, what is something we're not talking about on the team that we should be?
That's a great
It's
question.
another example of something invisible, and often you're going to get some like real answers here. Like, well, we're not talking about how Joey is literally missing every deadline. What we're not talking about is that 3 of 6 people are burned out. What we're not talking about is we have needed 2 more resources for 6 months and everybody is dead inside. So it's going to be a spicier answer, probably. What we're not talking about is the fact that our CEO is an ass clown and just went on, went in Forbes.com and wrote this article, and we're all embarrassed about it. There's so much that is happening that people don't necessarily have daylight to talk about.
That is a really great question. What are the things that we're not talking about that we should be?
Yeah.
It's a really good one. I'm going to have to
steal it,
I have
Travis.
to write that down.
Steal this question.
Buy the cards. And that's I think that's been a big shift over the last 10, 20 years, is digging in beyond just the deadline, the project status. I was listening to your episode with Cattell Ledoux from your own podcast, talking about how the world of work has changed over the last 20 years. And she gave a great answer.
Yeah.
But I want to ask you that question in reverse. And where do you see the world of work going in the next, maybe not 20, but 5 to 10 years? How's it going to change?
Good question, Travis. You should do an episode about it. The easy answer that I don't have any expertise to define is AI.
Yeah.
I don't know what that's going to do. It's not my field. I barely understand. I had a coaching client earlier today who was using ChatGPT to help write her resume in ways that I was like, oh God, send me to the woods. I mean, it was good, actually. Did a good job. So it's almost like the specter of AI, or I think there's a lot of anxiety. There already is AI, right? For example, you're typing an email in Gmail, and it suggests how you might want to end the sentence. Yeah. Cool. We say yes. Okay, that's AI also. But this ghost of no one will have jobs in the future, the robots will do it all. I don't actually think that's super valid, but I don't know enough about it to say what isn't valid. And so therefore, I wonder if what we might start prioritizing are things that robots can't do. I don't know if robots can ask questions like that, but I mean, probably at some point they can. But you know what I'm saying? I think it's maybe the soft skills that's going to differentiate somebody.
I think you're right. I mean, is AI going to take away certain positions? Probably, but there's always something taking away certain positions. I mean, Agreed. It wasn't too long ago where 80% of the economy was agriculture. Absolutely. Things change all the time. It's like knowing stuff used to be a tremendous skill. Now,
yes.
Bar banter is dead, because anytime you want to know something, you just whip out your phone and ask it. Googling is a really good skill now.
Yes.
But it's becoming less valuable because now you have these things that can do the Googling for you. So what's the next skill?
I mean, and that's really the thing, right? Is that we don't know. So therefore, if we don't know what the next thing is, all we know is that there will be a next. So how do you put yourself in a flexible position where you can say, I don't know what's coming, but I'm helpful with people and I can think on my feet. Cool. That's a great resume to have, or what are your kind of qualities or attributes that you could contribute no matter what? In this conversation with a client earlier about her resume, we were talking about networking, and we were both sort of agreeing that these cold call, random, hey, can we have coffee? Let me get to know you. I mean, a one-off of that, people might entertain. But the fact they get spammed all the time with those kinds of things, nobody's going to say yes to that. However, my anecdote to her was that I recently went to a writing conference. I don't have a deep network in writing. It's a new field for me. And at the end of the writing conference, I really liked the people who were putting it on and the organizers. And I went over to their table and I said, can I help you carry anything to your car? And they were like, yeah, actually, we have all these boxes of books. And I was like, yeah, no problem. I didn't do that for any specific outcome, but I wanted to be helpful and I liked them. And at the end, they were like, do you want to come to dinner with us? And now I have 5 good buddies who are deep in this writing community, who I have some of their phone numbers, but I don't really care about that. I'm not making a power move, to DM famous poets, but the point is that was a moment of networking. And all it needed me to do was to offer some help. Mm-hmm. If I had emailed them individually to ask for a cup of coffee and talk about writing, I don't know if that would have gone through, but it was a moment of networking. And me and my client talked through moments where she might, have a more casual approach or offer some help in a non-traditional way that actually just kind of proves out you're a person and I'm a person. Okay, cool. Now we know each other. Networking doesn't always have to look like, this terrible thing that we imagine it is.
Well, it was so genuine too.
Yeah.
And, so many people when they're trying to network or trying to reach out or trying to sell something, they want to present value, but it's not valuable. It's a Trojan horse of value, so I can come in and pitch you on my $30,000 service.
Totally.
And so how do people do that? How do they find that genuine value without, you weren't trying to get anything out of it?
Right. I mean, this is going to be perhaps a spicy take in this world of platforms, but I think you go slow, man. I think you meet a few people a quarter and you don't look at your follower count, who arguably don't even know anything about you anyway. I have a newsletter here. I'll put all the transparency in the world. I've been running Plucky for almost 10 years. I think my newsletter has 3,000 people on it, but that number is always really weird in MailChimp because it's you have 3,000 subscribers, but some people unsubscribed along the way. Anyway, who knows, everyone? But I think it's between 2,000 and 3,000. I don't know all of them, but after, pretty much for the day after I send a newsletter, I just vaguely scroll through and see what's going on, who read it or whatever. And there are a lot of people that I know. I'm oh yeah, how's your kid? Oh yeah, you. And I don't write to all of them because I don't have time for that. But there are definite connections to those people that I've met along the way. And it's so meaningful to me. I have a huge open rate of my emails because they know who I am and I know who they are. And I also don't shove shit down people's throats. I just write one newsletter a month and I tell them what I have for sale pretty transparently. And then people call me when they need me. So I think that's the answer. I think you go slow. If you try to go fast, it's going to be really hollow. So you go slow, you are authentic, you offer help to carry heavy things, and that person sees you as that kind of resource. And maybe someday, they can help you. But if it's an interaction for a money transfer, or in that direction, I don't know. It's lame sauce. I don't like that. And then when people hold it against you, platform, whatever, I mentioned this writing community, I have a book that is now in the phase that people are beta reading. So that means that it's all done and ready to go. God, publishing industry sucks because they're you need a platform of 30,000 people. And I'm what kind of drama would I need to get into to have 30,000 Twitter followers? Get out of here. So I just have to decide that is not my metric of success. Uh-huh. And I prefer to write a more homegrown newsletter where the biggest driver for my business is word of mouth by far.
As a fellow elder millennial, it is bred into our DNA by the modern cinematic masterpiece, Jerry Maguire.
Oh,
fewer clients, more connection.
There you go. That's it.
That movie came out at 42. I'm 41. That movie came out we were 13 years old, 14 years old.
Yeah, middle high school. Yeah.
Yeah, that's bred in our DNA. Fewer clients, more connection. I love it. So tell me about your book. I Believe in Everything. That's the title of it, right?
That's the title. It's called I Believe in Everything. The long story short is that I'm okay now, mostly, but I was diagnosed with a brain tumor in 2016. And I had a craniotomy 2 weeks later to take the tumor out, which was pretty big, size of a lemon behind my left eye. And my sons were 8 months and 3 years old at the time.
Jesus.
And it was a time, Travis. I mean, obviously, I had to close Plucky down for 6 months, but indefinitely, of course, at those moments. You don't know what's going to happen. And I studied writing in college, and I always wanted to write a book, but one gets busy having babies and businesses. And so that had not yet kind of come back around as a goal. But the book is about, obviously, an unexpected diagnosis and going through very challenging times and recovery, but like kind of accidentally, a couple spiritual things happened during this. Not religious. I am explicitly not saying that, but a couple of big things happened that kind of moved my perspective or my soul almost. And I felt like there was an invitation from the universe almost. It was like, you're going to write a book and it's going to be called I Believe in Everything. So in many ways, I've been working on this book for 6+ years. In many ways, I kind of just feel like I've been doing my homework assignment from the universe. And now I'm like, here you go, turning it in by the deadline. So someone take it and publish it now, And that has been its own journey of, like I said, figuring out who wants to listen to somebody who doesn't have X Twitter followers or whatnot. But it's funny, Travis, I started querying agents last year. I spent 6 months doing it. I got no bites. I felt depressed. I tried it again this year. Or I didn't try it again this year. I opened the book up again this year and I looked at it and I realized it's not ready. And so I just actually this morning finished reading it for the 50 millionth time and editing and reconstructing. And I really feel proud of it now. And I think last year I was putting it out there and I was like, please let me know in the edits what should change. And now I'm like, nothing will change. It's perfect, And I guess that's ideally what you'd want to feel when you put your art in the world,
Mm-hmm. Well, if we had more time, I'm very curious about this, the spiritual awakening that you experienced during this time. But
yeah,
that might have to be for conversation part 2 after the book comes out.
I would love it.
Back. Yeah. Jen, this has been fantastic. If people want to connect with you, if they want to subscribe to this magical newsletter, get you over the 3,000 threshold, what's the best way for them to track you down?
Yes, new best friends. Please subscribe to the newsletter. You can go
I have tons of value I give to you.
Oh my God, I love it. So my website, I'm sure Travis will put it in the notes, is beplucky.com, beplucky.com. And then for newsletter, you just /newsletter, but it is also on the front page. You can scroll down. You can also follow me on Instagram @bpluckster. And I would definitely recommend going to beplucky.com and looking at the shop. I've got a number of rando things in there I've invented. This is the thing, you're born and no one is ever like, one day you will invent a product for managers. Like, this was not said over my bassinet. This was like not said at my master's in French Lit day. Sometimes we just end up good at weird shit. And that seems to be what my career has been about. So, I would be so happy. And actually, if you buy something from the shop and you have kids, just shoot me a quick note and I will include stickers for them. If I don't know you, I don't know if you have kids, but if you do, you should feel free to tell me and I'll throw some stickers in. That's my treat.
What do you mean this wasn't said over your bassinet? I totally played in the backyard pretending I was hosting a radio show for hiring managers and job seekers.
That's your spiritual quest. That's part 2. We both will share.
Jen Dary, this has been fantastic. Really appreciate it. Thank you to our producer, Noah Cuff. This has been Hire the Podcast. See you soon.